Sorry.
Welcome to another episode, another issue of the Chrissy Mayer podcast. We're on iTunes, YouTube, Spotify, and SoundCloud. And if you're listening to us right now on iTunes, please go and leave a 5-star review. I read the best reviews every week, so long as they're 5 stars. You know, it could be a poem about how much you like me. It could be, you know, where to find good dog and cat videos, really anything, so long as it's 5 stars, I'm gonna read it. It could be creepy, flirty, whatever. It's all good. I want to talk about my sponsors really quick. Silk City Hot Sauce. Please go to silkcityhotsauce.com. Use the promo code CMP, and you can be a goddess like me. That's corny. But they have tons of great stuff. I was never into hot sauce in my life before them. And now, like just today, I put some on my eggs and it's really changing my life. It's flavorful. Go to silkcityhotsauce.com. Use the promo code CMP. You're going to get 15% off your whole order. And they're going to throw in a free bottle of cherry sriracha. I don't know. I feel like you could put this on ice cream. Red jalapeno, cherries, lime juice. Okay, maybe not garlic. Kosher salt. Boom! And you're going to get some free stickers. So please go to silkcityhotsauce.com. Promo code CMP gets you 15% off. And guess what? Adam and Eve says that the best part of staying at home is playing at home. Did you know that, Alejandro?
I did.
Go to AdamandEve.com and use your special code CMP at the checkout so you can get almost any item online for 50% off. I'm no math whiz, but that sounds like half. And when you use our discount code CMP, you'll also get bonus gifts. 6 spicy movies, a 3-piece bonus set. This almost sounds like describing food. I love it. Plus free delivery. Adam and Eve has thousands of gifts, toys, and movies to help us lock down some great sex. I think it's really important because when the lockdown started, I thought it was going to be nothing but sex all day, every day, and that has not been the case. So not that there's anything wrong with that. I've been very productive with this podcast, but I feel like Adam and Eve, I'm going to hit them up as soon as we're done and see if I can get anything vibrating sent to my house. So excited to have this guy on the show today. He is a journalist he's into UFOs, paranormal and paranormal research. He's a director of operations for Open Minds Productions and the host for Open Minds UFO Radio, Alejandro Rojas. How are you?
Hello, I'm good. How are you?
I'm super. There's so much to talk about with UFOs, and as you were saying to me earlier, you've been doing so many Zooms and interviews. Everybody is hitting you up right now because, you know, more is coming to light. I mean, like you said, this is nothing super new, but our government is kind of releasing more videos, more news, it's in the conversation about UFOs, and which is interesting because they changed the phrase, or what they call it, from a UFO to a UAP, and I'm wondering, like, to me, that sounds like the government changed the term so that they don't have to talk about UFOs anymore. Like, they can deny UFOs. I'm so skeptical of the government, so that's why I have an expert like you here.
Yeah, a lot of people are. So it's kind of funny. UAP, this term, I was never like really into it. Actually, I think it was the 80s where first there was this group that was more scientific that wanted to get away from all the baggage with the term UFO. It was a civilian group of serious researchers. So they started using it. Then the UK started using it. They actually have had an official UFO investigation organization since the 70s. It closed in 2008. But they started using the term, which was kind of funny. One reason I thought it was kind of silly is that, you know, if you go tell anybody, oh yeah, you know, I'm writing about UAPs, they're going to ask, well, what's a UAP? And you're going to have to say UFO. So, and interesting enough, UFOs was a term that was coined by the Air Force during Project Blue Book to get away from the term flying saucers, which was, of course, kind of a more silly term. So yeah, it's been an interesting evolution. And so a lot of scientists, some of the serious researchers really, they don't want to talk about UFOs, but they'll talk about UAPs.
Why is that? And then it's like, and now whenever you say flying saucer, you're like, oh, you're talking about the Carvel ice cream sandwiches, of course.
Yeah, well, that was kind of the big issue, is that the taboo around the topic. And that's one of the reasons that some of the people have gotten involved with pushing this issue forward more recently. In particular, like this guy, Chris Mellon, who was, he worked with the Senate Intelligence Committee during the Clinton and the Bush years. He's been kind of a government insider in Washington for a while. And he is one of the heirs of the big Mellon banking group. But he's been really into this topic. And his issue is that, not only are there the mysterious aspect to this whole thing, which is really important, but whenever the word UFO is invoked, everybody runs away. And because of that, people aren't looking at, what could be drones or other like foreign technologies that we should be looking at. So we've got this big blind spot, and it's really irrational. It's because of this goofy fear of this term UFO. We're not looking at some of these things. Some of them could be threats from foreign governments. And then he also argues, though, even more strongly that, however, there's a large subset of these that we don't know where they come from. And we really need to look at that too, and be more open with the public about what we do in those arenas. So that taboo and has kind of created a dangerous situation is what Chris Mellon's argued.
Okay, so just saying UFO got such a bad rap that we had to just find a new thing to call them, and maybe they'll end up as some sort of a dessert. We'll see. It'll be, because you mentioned, the Clintons, Obama, John Podesta, they've all been very interested in disclosing information around this. What politics do you think are involved? Because I thought at one point maybe, who knows, maybe Bill Clinton would have mentioned it. It just seems like there was talk of more of it coming to light, and then it hasn't. So.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of interesting in that the Clinton was really into it. His, Secretary of State for a period of time, John Podesta, was into it, or not Secretary of State, his chief of staff, who then also became the campaign manager for Hillary. They were all really into it, and they've got a history of it. Another rich billionaire heir, Lawrence Rockefeller, actually was really into this topic. He funded some research into it and also created this document that he thought was the best evidence that there is it's a mysterious situation that needs to be taken seriously. In fact, one of my colleagues at Open Minds TV worked on that document, and we've got it. You can download it under UFO resources at my website, Open Minds TV, and read it and see all these great cases. But he was friends with the Clintons, and he was giving them information and trying to prod them to make inquiries and take it more seriously. He really didn't get too far, but Bill Clinton has mentioned a few times that he's looked into the situation, but he always ends it with, I didn't find anything, but they could be hiding something from me. In one particular case, he said, I wouldn't be the first president that career bureaucrats have lied to or hid stuff from. So he still thought there was maybe something to it. As time has gone on, there hasn't been a lot of interest in Washington. There was a time where Shirley MacLaine had written a book, and I forget his name, Dennis Kucinich, when he was running for president, he was asked in a debate, well, what you said you saw a UFO, in Shirley MacLaine's book. He was made fun of, and it pretty much ended his campaign. It wasn't just that, but it was kind of a hot potato, something you stay away from. It's not something that's going to add to your credibility. But what's happened now is that during all of those years, people like me, when we come across a government document that says, hey, you took this Iranian case in the 80s very seriously, we've got these government documents, they'd be like, no, we don't take UFO seriously. Despite all these government documents that were coming out that showed that they were taking these situations seriously, they were essentially gaslighting us and saying, no, we don't care about that. That's goofy stuff. Come to find out, recently in 2017, that they did indeed have at least one UFO project where they were looking into it. Now we're hearing it sounds like there were more of these projects. So they weren't being honest with us. And what we're seeing is it seems like the Senate Intelligence Committee is saying, hey, you haven't been telling us about this UAP research you've been doing. Now we want to know. And if you're going to do it, you need to do it in a better way than you've been doing it. And right now it is very bipartisan. It's, people on both sides. Of course, Fox News has really picked it up. They've been interviewing all of the people involved, probably more than any other network out there. At the same time, you have Democrats in the Intelligence Committee who have also come out and said they're interested in it. So you do, and Marco Rubio is in charge of the Senate Intelligence Committee. So it is very bipartisan, the interest in this topic, and the non-interest, because you do have people on both sides also saying there's nothing to it. Even the president said, I don't really think there's anything to it, but I'll let the Navy look into it.
Because I think Trump at one point said, maybe it was when he was being interviewed by his son, like, it'll be interesting, we'll see what happens. And I'm wondering, like, what do politicians, or like, what does anybody have to gain by denying it or acting like they're not interested? Because, like, to me, what is more interesting than this?
I think it's credibility. They feel like it's going to hurt their credibility if they talk about it and look into it because of that taboo. And, a lot of people argue that this whole taboo was government created. There was a panel that the CIA had put together about UFOs, and the panel had come out, there's probably not much to it, but the belief in it could be very dangerous. And the Russians can use this for counterintelligence. So we really need to try to curb people's belief in this and poo-poo it as much as possible, which they did over the years. The MOD, like I said, the Ministry of Defense in the UK, they had a UFO program. Well, one of the guys who worked on that program is Nick Pope, and he's now out talking about UFOs. By working on this program, he was convinced there is a true mystery to it. But he said they would use what he called spin and dirty tricks. So in other words, when the media would call and say, hey, there was a case, locally, we've heard the government's looking into it, he would, a common answer would be, no, we don't look into little green men. He wouldn't be lying. He's not necessarily denying that they looked into it, but he's making fun of the thing, and he's giving them a good, soundbite. We don't investigate little green men, and then which encourages the media to then take a non-serious stance. And those were the sort of tricks he said they would use to kind of get the media off their back. Meanwhile, they are seriously investigating some of these things.
Yeah, that's so interesting. And I guess I heard somewhere else that basically every president since Eisenhower has like known about, UFOs but they've all been like, can't talk about it. I don't know that we have enough evidence to show that for sure.
I think that even with the current president, he said he was briefed, but he doesn't believe there's anything to it. I think most people would believe he probably would share if he did think there was something to it. At the same time, the Senate Intelligence Committee says they didn't know about it. They should have been briefed on these things because they do have access. Supposedly, the way it's supposed to work, the Senate Intelligence Committee has access to every black project there is. And in fact, Chris Mellon, that was his job, oversight of the black projects, and then conveying that information when asked to the Senate Intelligence Committee way back in the day. And part of the problem, Luis Elizondo, he's the guy who ran this Pentagon UFO project that we heard about in 2017 once he resigned. He said that essentially he was finding there was real stuff to this. He was trying to get it up the ladder. He worked for the Office of the Secretary of Defense, and he knew the Secretary of Defense, General Mattis at the time. And he was trying to get this information to him to say, hey, this is a big deal. We really need a bigger program about looking into this stuff. But they wouldn't let him get it to that level because of things such as plausible deniability or credibility issues. There's gatekeepers, and he's got to go say, hey guys, I want to take this to the Secretary of Defense. And they would say, no, we don't want you to bring it to him. We don't feel there's enough to warrant, exposing him to this information and the potential of getting made fun of and everything. So they weren't taking it up the ladder. They were keeping this information to themselves. And there's been a lot of hoarding of information for various reasons. And so it's plausible, if not probable, that a lot of this information really didn't make it to those levels.
Wow. And what are your feelings on, because we know that the first Bush worked for the CIA for a time. So, I mean, to me, he seems like somebody who would know about it, of course.
Yeah, it's difficult to know. Donald Rumsfeld, or no, not Rumsfeld. Yeah, Donald Rumsfeld. He was actually knew and was friends with Dr. J. Allen Hynek, who was on the TV show, of course, Project Blue Book that he is represented. But that was a real guy. He was a scientist that all the way from the 40s to the 60s assisted the government investigating UFOs. At first, he thought there was nothing to it. But later on, he was like, wow, this is a real mystery. We really need to look into this. And he then became a major advocate for serious research into UFOs. Once he left working with the Air Force, he started up his own organization, the Center for UFO Studies, to scientifically investigate all of this stuff. Rumsfeld knew him, and they were actually friends. So it seems like he was into the topic. Bush Sr. never said anything about UFOs or knowing anything about UFOs. Allegedly, there is a guy named Daniel Sheehan who was a lawyer, and he worked on the presidential papers. Someone who worked in DC as a lawyer. He claims, because he's really into the topic, that he tried to get this information to the White House during the Carter years. And allegedly, he was told that Carter did go to Bush Sr. and say, hey, I want to know what you know about UFOs, while he was in charge of the CIA, and that Bush told him, you don't have a need to know. You're not cleared for this information. It's kind of a secondhand story from this Daniel Sheehan, who still stands by this to this day. So we don't know if that actually happens, but that's what he claims. We do know that Carter, because President Carter saw a UFO, and during his campaign, he said he would try to get information out if he could. And he did go to NASA and say, hey, guys, I want you to investigate UFOs. They then wrote a letter to the Air Force and said, well, what do you think about us doing this? And the Air Force said, it's a lose-lose situation. Scientists don't want to look into this. The UFO people are never happy with what you say. We recommend that you don't do it. And NASA did say, we politely decline, and he declined to look into this. So it's hard to say for sure what Bush Sr. might have known, because he hasn't said anything directly. But at least we do know Carter and some others have looked into it.
Yeah. And do you feel like there is a kind of a struggle between like the Senate Intelligence, like what they just revealed, and the Department of Defense? Like, do you feel like they're kind of like at odds
Yeah, I think so. I think, well, we don't know directly for sure, but here's the indications that, when Elizondo, this Lou Elizondo came out, he came out and said, and the New York Times wrote about this, that this was a real investigation. We had real cases. Some of these are Navy cases, such as this case in 2004 that happened to the Nimitz Carrier Strike Group while they were off the coast of San Diego doing training exercises in military airspace that is restricted, that they kept getting these radar contacts. They scrambled a jet to go take a look. The guy in charge of all the jet fighters, the commander of the squadron, went in close because he saw this object, and he followed it. He tried to chase it. He described it as a 40-foot wide giant tic tac, white, smooth, that it maneuvered for a second and then took off at an incredible speed. The radar guy came out, other jet fighters came out as witnesses to this event. And the Navy ended up saying, yeah, this was real. We stand by these guys. This was an actual unidentified. We don't know what it was, which was, very different. It's surprising to see the Navy do this. But so the Navy was cooperative. Then there was this show Unidentified on the History Channel where Lou Elizondo with this guy, Chris Mellon, I mentioned earlier, met up with or went into business with this guy, Tom DeLonge, who's a rock star, who's been interested into this stuff. And they had a TV show about their investigations. And the Navy allowed, for instance, other jet fighter pilots to go on the show because if you're an active, military person, you can't just go on TV. You got to get permission to do that. And they allowed them to do that. So the Navy has been really cooperative all along. But more recently, once the Senate got involved and said, hey, we want you guys to give us a report and everything, it seems like their tone has changed a bit. Recently, they said that in a question to a guy who runs a site called the Black Vault, John Greenwald, he was asking about information about UFOs and some of the Nimitz cases, that sort of thing, and the radar data they have or that sort of thing. And they said, essentially, that information's classified, we're not going to share it, and that this Elizondo guy never worked on this UFO project, which is really weird because we know he did. Senator Harry Reid, who started the project, has stated that. Chris Mellon, who worked with the project while he was in the government, stated that. All of the contractors and these witnesses have all said, yeah, Lou Elizondo is a guy I talked to with ATIP. So it's very well established he did. But this isn't the first, it's the first time the Navy's done this, but it's not the first time they've denied that Elizondo worked on ATIP. Kind of just, it seems retaliatory that they aren't happy that this has been brought out, and now, Big Brother, the bureaucrats are now meddling in their business. It seems like they're not appreciative of the situation.
It's like hearing you talk about that kind of reminds me almost of Bob Lazar, and he was somebody who, God, I'm sure most people have heard of at this point, but he worked on either at Area 51 or somewhere similar, and he, claims that he was hired to reverse engineer alien spacecraft, and then, years later, certain folks denied that he ever worked there or denied that he went to school, and he was on Joe Rogan's podcast. There was also a documentary kind of about him on Netflix. So, and I've heard on a previous show that you are actually someone who is skeptical of him, which I haven't heard yet.
Yeah, and mainly because, so Bob Lazar came out in about 1990, 89, I think it was, to KLAS, the local CBS affiliate. There's a guy, George Knapp there, who writes about UFOs and has been one of the, only mainstream writers on UFOs. In fact, he's very attached to this whole ATIP program. He knew a lot of the insiders and has released a lot of information. But this guy, Bob Lazar, comes to the station, says he worked at this place. Well, actually, George, through the grapevine, heard that this guy was saying this, said he worked at a facility. He would essentially fly, and a lot of people do this. It's called Janet Airlines. I've got some great pictures, and you can see them over there by the Luxor if you're at the airport. These unmarked airplanes that fly people from Las Vegas to Area 51, because Area 51 is, of course, very secretive. And Lazar said he would fly into Area 51 and then be bussed down to Papoose Lake and an underground facility there where they had 9 crashed UFOs that they had recovered at various states of disrepair. And his job was essentially to reverse engineer one of them, that he was trying to understand this propulsion system that they had. And he was able to look at this craft, and it was, at least the seats and everything were very small. It seemed like for very small people. And for that reason, they called them the children. That was kind of their nickname for whoever flew these things. Must have been children because those seats are so small, even though, he knew that was, he believed that the sense was these were extraterrestrial vehicles that were being back engineered. So that's what he claimed. He also claimed to work at Los Alamos, and he claimed to have certain degrees, none of which could be verified, or at least by Los Alamos or the schools that he went to. The hard part about the schools is that even if he says, well, the government purged all of my records, even if that happened, though, a lot of people argue, especially if you're in a master's program, people know your school, your schoolmates know you. You talk to professors. If you're getting a secondary degree, you're working very closely with your professors. So there would be an abundance, at least for me, I know, I would have an abundance of people to rely on to say, yeah, this guy was my buddy in college, to verify that I was going to those institutions. But nobody's been able to verify that that Bob Lazar actually got these degrees, and those schools deny them. That seems pretty shaky. What's that?
Maybe he just had no friends.
Yeah, maybe he had no friend. That could be it, but that's a difficult part. George Knapp was able to find a directory at Los Alamos that listed Bob Lazar, but it listed him as working for a contractor. So who knows what he was doing there, but it seems like he really did work there, but we don't know to what capacity. Some people have said, well, they contract out the janitors. He could have been a janitor. I don't know if he was a janitor. He's obviously very scientifically inclined. He's very intelligent. He builds rocket cars, all of this complicated stuff. As a hobby, he now runs a scientific supply company that essentially kind of sells scientific supplies to high schools and stuff, but also companies, because he has some kind of rare type of things that he sells. And sometimes he even sells them to the government. He's got government contracts, which is kind of interesting. But yeah, the other hard part is that there's been no verification. KLAS, for example, has been the number one station to cover Area 51. They've been covering Area 51 before anybody knew about it back in the 80s. It was only Bob Lazar who made it famous once he came out and attached the alien thing to it. But none of the other people have worked at Area 51. None of them have ever, corroborated that information. So we haven't seen this technology he says he's worked on. We haven't had anybody come out and say, yeah, I worked with Bob, or I also worked on this project. So there's just Bob all by himself making these claims. And so I think it's really hard. And I've learned through experience, unfortunately, no matter how convincing someone is, the most convincing people can also be liars. So it's just hard to, confirm this is true with the word of just one person.
Interesting stuff. Do you, I've heard that, these alien craft were found years and years ago, and there have been over the years different ways that we have used this back engineered UFO technology, such as LED lights, Velcro, Kevlar, our computer chips, fiber optic cables, infrared night vision, and anti-gravity, which is not, technology that's made available or the public is not aware of. How do you feel about that? Do you believe that's true?
I am skeptical of those things, but and here's why. Again, all the stories are different. So you have Bob Lazar's story, you got this person's story, this other person's story. This story that you're talking about comes from Colonel Corso. He was a colonel in the Army. He actually, during World War II, was in charge of a missile battalion in Italy. Once the war was over, he was actually kind of in charge of Italy for a period of time till Italy got, their government back up and running and everything. So he was a very important person. Then he went to go work at the Pentagon. He worked at Wright-Patterson, the Foreign Technology Division, where Blue Book was held and where allegedly the Roswell stuff went. But when he was working at the Pentagon, his boss, a general, came to him and said, according to him in his book, which was a New York Times bestseller the day after Roswell, his general came to him and said, hey, we've got this box of stuff. And he essentially said it was just like a box of stuff. He said, this is what we were given from the Roswell stuff, what we were able to keep. We just put it away. We haven't done anything with it. See what you can do with it.
Garage sale.
Yeah, garage sale. But instead what he did, which didn't make him money, but made other people a lot of money, supposedly, if this really happened, he says he took those parts and he gave them to different contractors who were working on developing, weaponry and technology for the Army. And that they were then able to take those pieces and parts and develop some of the things you talked about: Kevlar, night vision, microchips, all of this sort of thing. All of these companies deny that. They say, well, we've got a train of information. We've got it documented what technology, what leaps and discovery we were able to make to get to where we are with all of these different technologies. But of course, they would deny it. So who knows if that story is true? Colonel Corso has kind of made other comments like, those things didn't really happen to me. They happened to some of my friends. And I was the last to survive, you know, just old age. He was very old when he came out with this and since passed away. But he said, since I was the last surviving, you know, one of this army group that had these experiences, you know, we had made a promise, whoever was the last of us is going to reveal to the world what had happened. And that's what he said he did. So his kind of claims that it happened to him. Then he says it didn't all happen to him. It happened to him and his buddies. He also has these notes that are really weird that supposedly this book was written about, which talk about him meeting an alien in the desert, and this alien kind of telling him that essentially that they're bringing a new future to humanity if we can handle it. This allegedly happened back in like the 70s. But of course, none of this has come to fruition. The aliens haven't really come to help us into any new world or anything. So that's hard. On the flip side, I got an interview recently with one of the scientists who worked on this government Pentagon project. And there was a recent New York Times article based on this guy's claims that we do have crashed UFOs. His name is Dr. Eric Davis. But what he told me is that there was the Roswell craft, there was another one, and you know, there were a few others. We tried to back engineer them. We couldn't figure them out. Their technology was way beyond ours. So we just stowed them away in like an Indiana Jones type of warehouse, and scientists will once in a while go in and try to figure something out, but mostly it's all case closed because we don't know what the heck they are. He does not believe Bob Lazar at all. He gets very upset when anybody talks about Bob Lazar because he says Bob Lazar's science is way off, that he claims Bob Lazar doesn't have as much scientific knowledge as he says he does, because the science that he espouses around all of this is just way off and gobbledygook. So there's that. So all of these stories don't jive. So which story do you believe is hard? And they're all anecdotal. So Eric Davis says he gets this information from buddies who are working on other classified projects, because that's what he does. He works on classified projects. And that, you know, this is kind of the rumor that's out there among the people who work on these government classified projects. So that's what makes it really hard to know what might be true or not.
Okay, good answer. I was listening to, I think it was a YouTube video where I was, it was with David Wilcock and Corey Good, where they talked about like the uses of this back engineered stuff. And they also said that some of the earlier, first pictures of Mars from the 70s, they're basically saying, claiming that NASA has been, airbrushing stuff out, like not quite buildings, but like structures, and that, a lot of stuff early on was just really kept hidden from the public. And if anybody had photos, they were told to destroy them. And so can you confirm or deny?
Those two individuals say a lot of wild, crazy stuff that is just ridiculous. I would not use them as a source of information at all. Those are definitely people who I would say are not reliable when it comes to any information at all. I mean, Corey Good, supposedly, somehow he was like, a time traveler, and I don't know, really, really wild stuff.
You're talking about like 3 different types of humanoid aliens, like had pictures of them. One was like all blue, like they're called the blue avians that are just looks like something out of Avatar. They're covered in feathers. They're 8 feet tall, and it's like, it's pretty wild. It's like something out of a movie.
Yeah. And I mean, if you look at the skill sets that those two gentlemen have, they're very good at marketing. That's obvious that that's their top skill is marketing. And, but they showed little, I think, skills towards the type of science and stuff that they claim that they really understand. So they're not really taken very seriously, even though they have very large followings. They're not really taken seriously from any serious researcher or investigator, just because it's really easy to, well, I mean, they're not the type of people who rely on evidence or substantiating anything that they have to say, even though their claims are really wild. And certainly working in this field, if you were to right now, if you wanted to, if anybody wanted to, and people do this all the time, if you were to make up a wild story, and I mean like make it as crazy as possible, you're going to get a large audience. People love crazy ass stories.
Yeah.
They love wild, crazy stuff. And the crazier you make it, surprisingly, the more you're going to get people that are going to want to follow you and listen to you. And, you know, if you're like, nobody knows this. And of course, the government denies that I was, you know, working with them because they don't want this to be true. You know, the same kind of Bob Lazar thing. And I'm not saying that he's doing this, but you know, you could claim, well, the reason you can't find anything about my background and anything about me working at, you know, in the basement at the White House on working with the aliens is because they don't want you to know. And so they're denying I worked there, even though I did. I mean, there's an abundance of these type of people that come out. They usually get really large followings. They sell a bunch of books. None of them have had the staying power that these guys, well, I shouldn't say none of them. There are only a dozen or so that have the staying power of, like, especially Wilcox, who's been around for quite some time, whose story has evolved over the years, very much so. When he first came out, he was the reincarnation of Edgar Casey, and that was his whole thing. And that's what he was selling to people and talking about being able to the future and the Akashic records and all of this sort of thing before he really got into aliens and UFOs. And then this Corey Good kind of came out as his buddy to kind of talk about some of this stuff. But yeah, not very, I would say just if the story's really crazy, take it with a grain of salt, because, especially if there isn't anything to substantiate it. You know, in Bob Lazar's defense, at least he definitely is scientifically inclined. He definitely is proven to have worked at Los Alamos. At least he's got those things working for him. Someone like Colonel Corso, he was a colonel. He did work at the Pentagon. He did work at Foreign Technology. You know, Eric Davis, even, he is a government contractor, a physicist right now. So at least you can take them, you know, they can substantiate their background. So at least they have a little more credibility, or in some cases, a lot more credibility than some of these people who can't substantiate it. However, coming back to adjusting photos and stuff like that, there have been some people who have claimed that photos by NASA have been adjusted or changed in order to hide secret bases and things like that. I wouldn't say it's definitely been proven, but there's been rumors. Whether or not that's happened, I can't say for sure. I mean, if they were to see something, what would they do? I don't know. However, when it comes to the moon, we get better and better photography. Right now, we've got, you know, several different countries. We have tons of satellites around the moon. We can really see up close imagery. If you go right now, you can go look at some really up close imagery of the moon. And it doesn't appear, you know, we haven't found any type of alien bases or anything there as of yet. You know, you can go look at that stuff. That's the difference between, you know, the people coming out in the 80s or 90s saying that sort of thing. And now the technology's moved along and we can go look for ourselves. Even Mars, even though we can't look at every square foot like we can the moon practically, we're getting more and more eyes on that. You know, we just sent a new volley of aircraft or spacecraft out there, and practically every country or a lot of different countries are getting involved with that. So you've got a lot of different eyes on all of this stuff. And these are definitely, for instance, the Chinese are not going to listen to any US rule about what they can or cannot share or look at. Same with the Russians. So you've got a lot of very independent people out there looking. It doesn't mean that there's nothing. At the same time, you know, Russia and Chinese are two governments that seem to be very open to the idea that UFOs could be, you know, extraterrestrials from other planets visiting. So it's not like they're totally against that idea or trying to poo-poo it. I think you can argue that perhaps those governments are even more open than ours to looking into that possibility.
Do you think either one of those countries or even other countries are further along than the U.S. than, you know, in looking into UFOs, or, you know, is there anyone who you get the feeling like knows more than we do? And it seems almost like this piñata grab, right? Like to be the country that knows the most about UFOs can back engineer the crafts. It doesn't seem to be a thing that, like, I imagine a lot of people want to share on. So
yeah. Well, that's what Chris Mellon's argument has been, is that, you know, we need to be the first too. I mean, what if there's something to this? What if we're observing technologies from elsewhere? Do you want to let the Chinese get it and develop weapons off of it? Do you want the Russians to get it? We need to be on top of this. And that's their argument. And it could be, we have been on top of it. We just don't know what programs there are, but that could be of the Chinese and the Russians as well. They've not necessarily shared a whole lot of information. There's been a few governments that have created, you know, UFO research organizations that are official. One of those being France. They've had one going since the 70s. You can go to their website, Japan, right now, and they do share information about their cases. There's another.
Sounds French, because it is French.
Geipan. I like to say it, Japan.
Japan. Okay.
Geipan. And they do have a button up on the upper right where you can turn it into English so you can read everything. And then another government that's done that is Chile. Their organization is called CEFAA, CEFAA. What's interesting about Chile is that they have similar cases to like Nimitz, where they've scrambled jets to chase something, whatever those somethings are, take off at incredible speed, which seems to be a trend. Blue Book is full of cases like that. They essentially have said, they had a meeting where they brought all kinds of government officials together to say, okay, what's up with these UFOs? Now that we've been looking into them, can we figure out what their motivations are or anything about them? They essentially determined the only thing they can decide is that they seem to be benevolent. They seem to not want to hurt us, just watch us. The biggest danger is our pilots getting distracted by them. And so they kind of recommended maybe we just need to give our pilots a heads up. If you see them, don't get distracted. They're not going to hurt you. Our record is they're not really hurting people. And, you know, that's the other side of things, that if there is a third party coming here, if there is another civil... What's that?
I said the libertarians, but I don't know if
if there are other aliens, libertarians maybe from another planet, it could be possible. But if there are people coming from somewhere else, you know, they play a role. I mean, if they were coming here and they wanted their presence to be known, they could easily make their presence to be known. If they don't want their presence to be known, then they could probably just as easily hide themselves from all of our governments just as much as they hide against everybody else. So it could be that the governments don't have much because, you know, we do have a lot of cases across the country and a lot of documented cases even right here where objects are seen, just like with the Nimitz. We scramble our jets. They maybe even have a little cat and mouse before the objects disappear or take off at incredible speed. And, you know, our military could be just like, well, we chase them. That's all we know is that we chase them. We've gotten a few photos and pictures. We don't know who the heck these guys are.
Yeah, it seems like they don't want to be chased, you know, like they're just... Yeah. And I agree with you. If they wanted to do away with humans, they would have done it. I'm sure they know how to do it. They could probably end us all for sure. So yeah, I agree that they are friendly. And so that's interesting. It's like they're doing enough to be seen, right? It's like they're doing enough because they want to be seen, but not so much that people are scared shitless. I mean, some people are scared shitless by the side of it, but that's, you know, because of movies. Yeah. So that's what I think is even more interesting is the idea, and I feel like I've heard you say this on other shows, but that they may not even be, you know, most people believe, okay, this is a craft with aliens inside, right? And they're just driving it along. There's thoughts that perhaps these are multi-dimensional, maybe they're from the future, maybe the crafts themselves are the aliens themselves, right? It's just not taking the form, not taking a humanoid form. It's like a sea amoeba or whatever, amoeba in the air, or it's a
Exactly.
jellyfish. It's not a vehicle, it's a being. It's so like, what are your thoughts on that feeling?
You know, people like J. Allen Hynek, who was that scientist that worked with Blue Book, he was very cautious to say, he felt it was a genuine mystery, but he was cautious to say they're aliens. Not to say that something weird wasn't going on or it possibly couldn't be a third party. He's just saying, we got to follow the data and see where it takes us because of just what you said. There are other possibilities. They could be, one scientist named it space critters. He really thought that perhaps we were seeing biological creatures, and he called them space critters. There are some scientists that believe, in particular, there's one who wrote a book recently. He's great, Michael Masters. In fact, Michael Masters, and he believes they're from the future, and he's put together, you know, a bunch of research. He's written a book to show that what we say are aliens, these grays, these little guys with big heads and big eyes, humans will likely evolve to look like that, he says. So it's possible they're coming from the future. I like to say, you know, I like to ask people, do you believe it's possible that one day we'll be able to time travel? Most people say, yeah, probably. That is kind of implying there could be people right now. Because if in the future, if we could time travel, we might be coming back to right now. So, I mean, that is certainly possible. And then multiple dimensions is an idea that scientists have developed themselves. I mean, that's something they talk about quite a lot. That famous scientist, Michio Kaku, string theory is kind of a thing he talks about. Hawking, others, you know, believe that there is a possibility of other dimensions. So actually, a lot of scientists are open to the idea that perhaps these dimensions can sometimes interact with each other, or we can see something kind of like a phase shift or something from another dimension. And that could be what's going on. And that could answer a lot of different paranormal
Like a
possibilities.
like a big Doctor Who circle, and then it opens up, and then we can see like that sort of
Yes.
thing. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that sort of thing. In fact, Eric Davis claims that while investigating this mysterious ranch in Utah called the Skinwalker Ranch, it's scary. But he claims he saw some creature come out of a portal. Dr. Eric Davis, so the guy who was working on classified programs. So yeah, there's a lot of possibilities out there. And, you know, some people think that possibly all of those things are happening, not just one, but all of those scenarios. But yeah, scientists are often more careful about, you know, settling on one conclusion, which is sort of good because we need to kind of take all the data to try to figure out what might be going on.
What's your gut instinct on what it is?
I don't know. You know, I change my ideas quite a bit. I mean, I think it's entirely possible. I feel that, you know, there's no way, I don't think we're an anomaly, that we're the only intelligent species out there. There's got to be a lot. It could be even possible that, you know, who knows, maybe we were brought here like ancient aliens people believe, or that one scientist I talked to makes the argument that we don't know where life came from. We don't know, you know, we have theories that there was kind of a chemical compound, almost like a perfect storm of these sort of compounds getting together and lightning or some kind of spark being able to create life. But we don't know whether that happened on Earth. We don't know if maybe we were brought, you know, microbes landed here off on an asteroid and that's what started life. Some people even think that asteroid that had life might have come from Mars. So there was life on Mars that came and seeded it here on Earth. We don't know how or life was started, but we do know it's here, and the odds are that it is throughout the galaxy, that there's probably a lot of other intelligent civilizations out there. And think about what might we do if we found on another planet, you know, that there were some primitive people there. We'd probably do just like we do with animals. We would watch them and check them out, maybe even knock them out in the middle of the night and look at them a little bit and then take off, you know, just like a lot of people are claiming that they're being abducted by aliens and have stuff going on. So who knows? It's really hard to say. Definitely. I try to keep an open mind. In a couple weeks here, we've got a conference. It's actually my girlfriend runs it. We used to run it with Open Minds, but we sold it. I tried to get away from it, but I just can't. It's called the UFO Congress. And at that Congress, we have a lot of different perspectives. So we have a scientist, Kevin Knuth. He works at the SUNY in New York. I mean, a serious physicist talking about his ideas about if they are aliens, maybe it's this, and about how science really looks at all of this stuff. We also have this lady, Salma Siddiq, who when she was a kid in Ruwa, South Africa, her and a lot of her friends in kindergarten, like saw this craft land and these aliens come out. If you look it up, the Ruwa encounter, R-U-W-A, you see these kids and they're like talking about how this alien looked at them and they got the impression that we weren't taking care of our planet and we need to take care of our planet. I mean, these very advanced thoughts for these kids.
Yeah, sounds like something Greta Thunberg would say. Like, oh,
yeah, exactly.
Aliens told us. Yeah.
But these are these kids who just by looking at this alleged alien, they got these ideas. So we've got some of that stuff, people who also claim that they've had experiences, to really serious researchers. In fact, Nick Pope, that guy who did the UFO investigations in the UK, he's going to be speaking at this conference. Of course, you can't do in-person conferences right now, so this is going to be all online. But yeah, in a couple of weeks, if you want to spend a few days or even just get a ticket and you'll have access to all the videos. The great thing about being there live is you'll be able to interact and ask questions of these speakers and get involved and you know, converse and stuff. But yeah, we've got a gamut of all these different people with all these different ideas. And we try to verify that at least they believe what they're saying, even if what they interpret their experiences isn't really what happened. At least they believe what they're saying. So nobody like, we won't have Good or Wilcock there, but a lot, I think, more credible people with some really interesting stuff.
Like, you're like triple shit.
Yeah, I get really disappointed with people who I just really feel that people like that are just trying to make money off of gullible people. And I don't appreciate that at all. Like, for instance, if you come to the conference, you're going to hear a lot of interesting things, maybe some things that are just as wild as what they're saying. But I feel, you know, we vet these people, that these people at the UFO Congress really believe what they're saying. They're not doing it just to make money. In fact, these people aren't even selling things. They're just sharing their stories. So I think that that's what's really important, to try to figure out what the heck's going on here.
Yeah. Okay. Because you're not going to call it the UAP Congress anytime.
Not yet. Actually, there's this other organization I belong to, the Scientific Coalition for UAP Research. That one's more science-based, and so that uses a UAP term. But I think for most people, they're more interested in hearing even some of the more fringy stuff, the more stuff that, you know, hearing from these credible people like Salma Siddiq, who are just genuine, intelligent people sharing a really weird experience that they had, in her case as a kid, but not alone. Her entire class claims that they had this experience. So yeah. I think that's much more interesting.
Yeah, it's hard to have several people have the same exact story from the same spot. That seems pretty hard to deny.
Yeah.
So interesting. Okay, and where can people, if they want to go to the UFO Congress, where can they go to get tickets?
Go to ufocongress.com. So
okay.
At ufocongress.com, you can see who the speakers are, get your tickets, get all the details and everything there. And you can also find a link to UFO Congress at openminds.tv, because I advertise it a lot.
Awesome. Okay, cool. Speaking of other aliens, so you brought the Kardashians to Area 51. That's how you got your E credit?
And that's how I got to list E in the different channels that I've been featured on.
What was that like?
That was people, and it's funny that I'm so hesitant to say, a lot of people got really upset that I would even interact or talk with them at all. but I figured, why not? First of all, my sister is a big fan of the show. And I figured, why not? Because they really were interested in the topic. And in fact, they asked me to bring someone along who had an alien experience. And of course, I'm very journalistic about my writing. And so there's very few like people who claim to have alien experiences that I think are really solid, that have, supporting evidence and not just, an experience where they think that this happened. So I brought this guy, Travis Walton. There was a movie made about his experience called Fire in the Sky. And he was with a group of 6 different guys that had seen this UFO in the forest. They were loggers in the woods, in very rural Arizona. And they thought there was a fire. They went to investigate. There's a big disc in the sky. He jumps out being the youngest and being a goofball to go take a closer look. Some kind of force then caused it to fly through the sky. All the guys take off. They come back and he's gone. The police eventually, they went to the police and they're crying. Well, me and my girlfriend actually done a lot of research on this and found a lot of the witnesses. She found the sheriff the police officer that first talked to them. And he says, yeah, they were crying. They were freaked out. He's like, I believe them. They didn't hurt their buddy. They didn't know what the hell happened. They were freaked out. And so the police eventually started to guess that these guys maybe killed Travis because nobody could find him. Travis eventually ends up on the side of the road. He thought he had only been gone a few hours. He had been gone 5 days. And then later he starts to remember, interacting with these weird creatures and everything. So I brought Travis along and it was fun. They were super nice. They were very intelligent. I didn't know what we were gonna, they were really cool, actually. The only one who was kind of a jerk and he was just really skeptical of all of this stuff.
Bob Kardashian.
No, he was drinking in another van. He wasn't even, Rob was with us. It was one of the other ones who was just like drinking and drunk the whole time in another.
The worst one, or Chloe? No, Chloe's the one who has a whole new face now.
But the brother who's like partying all the time.
That I think is Rob. Yeah, there's only one brother.
I thought there were 2. Or there are 3 brothers, but they're Jenners.
The Jenners, Kylie and Kendall are Jenners. They are, they're
and then there's Rob.
Yeah,
and
Rob is the one.
Other brothers.
There's only one son. There's friends. I mean, they have friends in there.
Aren't there Jenner brothers though?
Oh yeah, there. It's Brody Jenner. Yeah, there might be.
Brody was drinking the whole time.
Classic Brody Jenner move. He's always.
The other guy, and I can't remember his name, and his wife was there, and they were extremely nice. The girls were there, so they were mostly there the whole time. So Chloe was there, Kim wasn't there, and this was actually when Chloe's boyfriend got caught cheating, and then he disappeared.
They caught him at a brothel or something, yeah.
And she did keep going to the room in the back of the RV, and people were saying he was probably there because nobody knew where he was. I don't know if he was there or not. I don't think so, though, because they camped that night, and we went to the campsite, and he wasn't there at all. So, but yeah, they were all really, really nice. They actually had some really good questions. They were super sweet. I mean, and what was interesting about the show, too, I've done a lot of reality shows, showing up to be interviewed or stuff. And typically they're trying to tell you what to do, tell you what to say. I never do that. I always tell them, I'm not going to read a script. If you want to know about this topic, ask me questions and I'll share, but I'm not going to read some writer's words about UFOs that are mostly BS, which typically the scripts they give you are. All they do for that show is set up cameras all over the place, like inside the RV, and they have the camera guys follow. And I was like, okay, are there topics you want us to talk about? And they're like, no, we're just going to film you guys. Just go with them, go out there and have fun. And that's it. So there was no directing going on at all, which actually I thought was kind of refreshing. But Bruce Jenner, he was Bruce at the time. He was the only one who was kind of a jerk. He was kind of jerky. And what was funny is Travis Walton was a huge fan of his because Travis had ran you know, and so he, you know, Bruce Jenner was a big idol of his. And I had mentioned, you know, Travis is a big fan, and it was kind of cool to see on the show that the girls, Kendall and not Courtney, who's the most famous one right now, the youngest daughter.
Kylie's the
Kylie.
Yeah.
So yeah, Kendall and Kylie went and talked to their dad and said, hey, you were kind of being a jerk and he's a big fan of yours. Can you go talk to him? And so he did. He went over and started talking to Travis and everything. And so he made good. But yeah, they were actually pretty cool. They got really freaked out. We only spent a couple minutes at Area 51 because we got out there and we got out of the car and we took pictures. And then the girls got too scared. They're like freaked out. So they're like, let's get out of here. So they wanted to get back in and leave again. I think they had the most fun listening to Travis's story as we drove out there. Wow. But they're pretty cool.
That's good. Oh, wow. That's so fun.
I know. People don't like me saying that. They get all mad, but it's the truth. They were pretty cool.
People like love to hate that whole family. I don't hate them. It's like they've been successful. They figured out how to give each and every one of them their own business at something, you know, like that's pretty amazing, you know, like
totally. Yeah. I argue that too. There's a lot of people that have TV shows and that are famous, but they can't always turn that fame into their own business. But they all have. They've turned their fame into these huge businesses, and they got gobs and gobs of money. I think that takes some talent and intelligence. And they certainly did come across as, I would even say when I do talks, their questions were above par. They were more intelligent than the average question that I typically
do. Do you remember anything that they asked you about?
Yeah, they were asking, let's see. They asked about Bob Lazar, I think, or about aliens. What's that?
Do the aliens wear makeup?
They didn't ask that. I guess they were asking about, they were definitely interested in aliens and whether or not there's aliens here and what they might be doing and if they're hurting people, all of that sort of thing. And I think it was also based off of fear. They were very afraid of the possibility of aliens here and messing with people.
Yeah, I've also heard people say that there's like, yeah, they're aliens, like they're people living among us, time travelers, lizard people. I'm sure
yeah. Yeah, people claim all of that. And that, you know, with the Corey Good thing, people are always, every conference now, oh, did you see blue aliens? I think I saw blue aliens at the conference. Even our conference, people are like, people saw blue aliens. And we're like, well, we're not aware of any blue aliens being at the conference, but if you saw them, okay.
Are there flat earth people who tend to like get in the mix with this?
There are some, not a whole lot. I don't think the flat earthers are into aliens and UFOs as far as I know.
Yeah, I think they're just like mostly obsessed with Antarctica.
Yeah, they've got their own pretty tough battle to.
That's the thing is like, and like listening to you, I'm like, okay, you're very careful about what you say, the claims you make, and it makes sense because I feel like most scientists, it's like, and you're studying such a historically taboo subject. It's like,
yeah,
you probably have to. It's probably a stress. Like even if you're really excited about something that you learn, you're like, well, I better come off knowing exactly what the fuck I'm saying, or else people are gonna say I'm a quack, and then it's probably like you got to work so hard because it's like I imagine you don't even want even just like a scratch on your record. I feel like it probably takes very little for people to, I don't know, I guess like delegitimize what you say, or I'm sure, do you feel like that's kind of like a fear, like a constant worry?
Totally. I think that, yeah, definitely. And in almost a good way, in that it's taught me to be very rigorous and careful to make sure that I have good sources for everything I claim. And it's kind of an interesting process when you do that, because you find out that some of your preconceived notions and ideas are based off perhaps more dubious information than you knew of, or were wrong. So when you go try to verify it, so you kind of hold yourself accountable too. But so it is tedious, but it's important because I totally believe in that phrase, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. a lot of people get frustrated that research has filled that is the case. And they're like, no, it doesn't. Well, yeah, it does. And, and it's okay. It just means that we've got a higher bar that we've got to hold ourselves to. But it's also very rewarding, because then the information that you are able to gather that is credible is very substantial. It's very convincing also. And that's what's great about what's going on right now, is because it was this sort of information that's been brought to the military and brought to the Senate Intelligence Committee. And they also understand and realize that this is credible information, and it is a credible mystery, and that it is something that we need to break this taboo. And I'm pretty happy that the military and these politicians, not the type of people that you typically are happy with, are taking it more seriously. The media is still struggling, though. The media is still not totally past that taboo. You do have some serious stories out there. The New York Times has really been forward, Politico, a couple of others, but otherwise you see a lot of media out there still just making jokes and making fun of it. And what's been interesting in this field is, even though I've got to really source my work and be careful about the facts I present, typically media doesn't feel that way. Typically mainstream media feels that they can be silly and goofy and just not be strict about the facts they present. And so they're often very false. So right now there's a lot of people writing, oh yeah, those videos, those things that the Navy saw were probably just drones from China or Russia. Well, don't you think the Navy would know that? And do you think the Navy would really put their credibility on the line to say these things are legit when they're not? Let alone these pilots and this David Fravor, like I said, this wing commander. This guy was in charge of all the jet fighters. I mean, this guy isn't going to put his reputation on the line if it's not something really crazy he chased.
Yeah, these are intelligent guys. They know what all the drones look like. Why do you think the media is so behind on the reporting?
I think it's kind of like what you had mentioned before, in that I have to be careful so I come across as credible. I think they feel the same way. Credibility is kind of big. In the journalism field, if you are wrong, your competitors are going to jump all over that. So they're really careful about what they're presenting for those reasons often. And I think that they're not as willing to put their credibility on the line for this topic. And plus, I think it's fun for them to make fun of little green men and make fun of, people who are weird and believe weird stuff.
And you're like, they're not green, they're blue now.
Yeah, they're blue and they've got feathers.
Yeah, they look like Birdman.
They're blue chickens is what people in the field call them.
Chickens, right. Do you feel that you have competition, competitors, like any industry, like comedy? There's people who fucking hate other comedians. They're at odds with each other. Their ideologies clash. Is that going on with you and your peers?
Definitely. And from both sides. So there are those who feel that I'm being too much of a tight ass, and it's like, oh, how can you not believe Bob? Or how can you not believe aliens are here, that people are being abducted? And then there's also the flip side of the people who are real skeptical and like, how can you think that that's serious, or take that person serious? How can you even mention Eric Davis? He says he saw something coming out of a portal in the woods. He's not credible. So yeah, you do get it from both sides, definitely. And sometimes, there's a good friend of mine even that we were really at odds about some of this stuff. And he stopped talking. We stopped talking to each other for like a couple years, which was really strange, until finally we were like, hey, I miss you, man. And we were able to work it out. But yeah, definitely. It can get really brutal. Of course, social media is always really brutal. So that can be pretty harsh. I'm sure there's people talking crap about me on Twitter right now.
No way. They're going to love you after this interview. Alejandro, so these videos were released. Everyone at this point, most people have seen like the Tic Tac ship video. That's very exciting. What do you think is next to be released? What would you like to see be released or be in the public?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I think right now, from recent messages that have been sent from the government or answers from the public officers, they're kind of battening down the hatches a bit. So it's moved. So we had, Luis Elizondo, Chris Mellon, these To the Stars guys coming out with a batch of information that they revealed to the public. The government then acknowledging that, or the military acknowledging that this is real. That then allowed them to say, hey, look, Senate Intelligence Committee, these guys have been looking into UFOs. Even though they've told the public they haven't been, they do take it seriously. So the Senate Intelligence Committee saying, what, really? Well, then they better tell us about it because they've never told us anything. So then them getting briefed on this information and them picking up the ball and saying, hey, we want to know more from you guys. And we want you to be, better at looking at this information. So, but that kind of takes the ball out of the court of Elizondo and Mellon. Now we're all focused on what they're calling the UAP task force, which is supposedly a multi-governmental agency group that is looking at this topic. And now the Senate Intelligence Committee has said, we want a report, not just classified, but we want a public report as well. So we can share with the public what you guys have been doing around all this stuff. So now it seems as though they've been saying it's classified, we're not sharing, it's classified, we're not sharing, when people in the public are asking questions. So it could be that they're now they're going to have to do this. So now they're going to have to try to put together these reports, put together this investigation, and they're kind of in a tough spot. So what'll be next? Next will be revelations from them when they come out with their report. Unfortunately, it might not be out till next March, but they are getting out information piece by piece here when different researchers and media guys are able to get that information out. So we'll see something. It'll be really interesting. One of the things that Chris Mellon told me he's been trying to do with this unidentified television program and with the information they've been releasing is like saying, hey, there are UFO cases out there that you guys looked at. So when you guys create your report, you better not tell us there's nothing to it because we know better. And we've presented on television and to the public now some of these cases that you looked into that better be in your report. So if they're not in your report, we're going to call you out on it, and be like, hey, they're not being forthcoming. They're still lying to us. We know there's these other cases out there. So they're kind of holding their feet to the fire in that way. So now is the time, I think, for also other people getting into this to kind of look at some of the historical stuff. And that's what I've been doing. It's not only breaking down what the government's been saying and what has been going on politically, but also I've been sharing stories about historical information, such as yesterday I just shared a story where the Belgian government, the Air Force, was investigating this wave of triangle UFOs that they had seen. I've also, from the main Roswell researcher, even though I'm skeptical of this idea, when we had our magazine, we used to have a print magazine. And I asked one of the top Roswell researchers, Don Schmidt, if you believe there's aliens, why? Tell me what is the best evidence, who are the best, your best evidence that there was that sort of thing. So I took that from the magazine and posted that on the website also recently. Stories also about potential other crashes. Because I want to, share as much information so everybody can make their own opinion. So now it's kind of sharing that, hey, you guys, none of this is new. All of this stuff the government is talking about right now has been happening ever since we've been looking into this topic. We've got these cases, serious, credible cases documented in Project Blue Book. This is nothing new. The government has been dealing with this all along. There's never been a consensus that there's nothing to it, like they've tried to tell us. There's actually many people who have taken it very seriously. So, this is something we can't let them gaslight us anymore on this. They do take it seriously, and we do need to know what they've been up to.
That's exciting. So it seems like there's more accountability. It seems like the sort of communication chain of command on this stuff has
Yeah.
disrupted, which is very exciting because I think it'll result in more information to the people, which is super, super cool. And as someone who, you know, you are very credible, and if people are listening to this, you know, into you and believing, and they're like really excited and curious to learn more, what are some books or places where people who are just now getting, you know, curious about this stuff, where can they go that is reasonably, you know, credible?
Yeah, well, definitely my website, openminds.tv. And also, I on our YouTube channel, I often, in a lot of my videos, I'll post like recommended books. And so you could see the list there. But to talk about some of those, one of them that I think, and you can get this free online too if you go Google it, is The Estimate of a Situation by Colonel Edward Ruppelt. He was the first guy to run Project Blue Book, and he wrote a book about, you know, how the government dealt with it and the best cases. And it's an incredible book because, you know, these are real investigations, like of UFOs flying over the airport in Washington, D.C., and jets scrambling to chase those, and the objects taking off. You'll see these in his book throughout the book. So a lot of really great cases and how all that started up back in the 40s and 50s. So he's definitely a good one. There's a friend of mine, David Marler, who's written a book on triangular UFOs. That's really good. A topic that was covered on Unidentified was UFOs and nukes. So UFO incursion over nuclear facilities and missile silos, those sort of things. The book is called UFO and Nukes by Robert Hastings. Leslie Kean, and it's spelled Kean, like Keen. She was one of the New York Times author of these great UFO articles coming out of the New York Times. She's also written a best-selling book called UFOs, Government Officials on the Record, that has a lot of really good stuff. And then I guess another one I can think of is Colonel John Alexander. A lot of these guys that are worked on this Pentagon program, or are even working with To the Stars, they have been working on, and some may know the name Robert Bigelow. He's a millionaire out of Las Vegas, who also has funded research and was involved with this research. A lot of these guys have been working on bringing paranormal to the mainstream for decades. So it's not like this is something new. These guys have been doing this for a long time. And one of these guys is Colonel John Alexander. And he's got a book called UFOs, Myths and Realities. I think it's one of the best books in this field. He, back in the day when he was in Army intelligence, he was also an inspector general. He looked into who are the secret holders? What's up with this UFO thing? Let's deep dive. And he got with people in intelligence and other areas, and they did do a deep dive into this. He also was part of kind of some other paranormal type of projects that happened back in the day with the Army. So he's got a really interesting book. He's very credible, interesting character too.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that before. Like, is there a correlation between us dropping the nukes? What was that? What, in the 40s? And it seemed like after that there was a ton of UFO sightings, and correlation between the aliens being like, "Whoa, what the fuck are you guys doing? Like, this is dangerous. Like, you know, they're probably," and which I think is, if that's true, that's incredible. Like, that they can pick that up, know that's going on, and be almost like the lifeguards of the universe, and being like, "Whoa!" Like, and if that's how they feel, how could they communicate that concern to us?
Yeah. I guess other than, and that's what a lot of people feel like, they are communicating a concern with us by visiting these facilities. In one case, there's a fairly well-documented case. There's actually more than one. There's one in Russia, but a case where there was UFOs seen over a silo, and then the missiles went offline. And it took the engineers some time to get them back online. And, you know, one of the guys who was in charge there, Robert Salas, he believes that definitely that it was the UFOs that disengaged those nukes. So, and that's what he believes. He believes, and others who write about this, that's how they're sending a signal that we can mess with your your, your toys and all we want. Then again, there's the possibility, like most of the government documents you find on UFOs are incursions over nuclear facilities. But that's also because these are the most sensitive airspace we got. So is it that they're flying over those more, or is it that we're just documenting and taking those cases more seriously? That's kind of difficult to say, I think. But there's a lot of those cases, and a lot of people, in fact, right now it's a big deal because there's this guy, Dean Johnson, who discovered that there have been something like 50 cases of what are called drones flying over nuclear power plants. And only 5 of those cases have been resolved. So they don't know what the heck happened with another 45 cases. In fact, I just tweeted yesterday, I had written an article in 2015 where there were these drone incursions over nuclear power plants in Europe. And it was a big deal. It was a big deal throughout Europe. And there was this French director of one of those facilities who said, those were not drones. Everybody keeps saying they're drones. They were not drones. Those were UFOs. We don't know what they were. So this is kind of a thing. Yeah, so that's really interesting.
That's so exciting. Everybody, please follow Alejandro on Twitter at Alejandro T. Rojas. Are you on, what are your other social media handles?
We also have Open Minds TV for just the UFO stuff. I tweet also other space science, sci-fi stuff, but Open Minds TV is pretty much straight UFOs. And then we have Facebook too. You can find me, or you can find Open Minds on Facebook, and YouTube, YouTube and Patreon, but especially YouTube. You can find Open Minds TV there. And I'm posting stuff like this all the time and doing, especially these days, doing a lot of live ones so people can come and interact and ask questions. So yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely a really exciting time. Alejandro, thank you so much for coming on. This was wonderful. Hopefully, we can talk again if there's more developments, which I feel like there will be. So, yeah.
Probably will be, but thank you very much. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, thank you. Okay.